computer recording technology works, hopefully. All right, welcome everyone. Q&A with Alex. That's this guy. Quick intro, I guess, for people who don't know me. What do I do? I do iOS development, been doing it for 8 years now, probably, and used to live in Silicon Valley, and I was just telling folks here, I just moved to Boston, joined Wayfair, and yeah, this Q&A is basically for anyone who want to join. I will probably do them more or less regularly if I have time. It's kind of, yeah, a chat about iOS and Swift stuff, everything coding-wise. You can ask me other questions, I just don't promise to answer. So yeah, and we were talking about flags first. Let's just recap a little bit. So Joshua had a question that he was asked on an interview, how to design, right? That's how they asked it, how to design a US flag.
How to architect the US flag.
Right. So essentially, how to actually display it in landscape mode, you said, right?
In landscape mode.
Oh.
Without using any picture images, just
right.
Make the flag.
So basically UI view elements, or I guess Swift UI eventually, if we ever use that thing. So yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I don't really know sort of the best approach, but off top of my head, as we were talking it through, what was it? The stack view for stripes, right? Equally sized. And then on top of it, another view that contains the stars part, right? And then a bunch of views, maybe it's a stack view as well, and a bunch of views that each one of them is a star. And I guess if you can't use images, then you probably do
well, the star, one star, we can use one image.
Oh, okay. Okay, at least that makes it easier. If not, you could draw it, I guess, with whatever line thingies. I've once ever I've done it. So
yeah.
Okay, and I don't have lights. Wait, give me one sec, guys.
Again, lights are
okay. Right, and someone was asking some other question. Sorry. Dennis, I think you had one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I'm asking a question about how to structure overall a project or some project where we have, for example, 3 or 4 apps. All of them uses some common codes, like, for example, flows, like a payment flow, where you have, some UI to show how do you want to pay, either with a credit card or a debit or a cash, and then other screens after that, and the whole 3 apps use the same flow. So instead of copy pasting it, we have put it in a submodule and reuse that. And the same applies to other things like realm models, for example, that are reused across the 3-4 apps. And my question was, if I have these 3, 4, or more 5 submodules that are used across 3 or 4 apps. Well, we currently have all these projects as separate repository. And I was thinking if putting them in a one repo was easier actually for working with the projects, especially when we are 3 teams working on these, different repos.
Right.
And, switching back and forth from a repo, it's a little bit of pain. Or when you update something in a submodule, you usually do it or when you add a feature in a submodule, you usually do it for one project, maybe one app, and you forgot to actually adapt it to the other apps.
Right.
And yeah, that integration is never calculated usually. So when you have one repo, I thought it was easier.
And you also, in our pre-call, you mentioned that you only have 3 people, effectively 3 developers working on it, even though they're in different teams.
Yeah, exactly. They can work on one or multiple of these projects.
Right. That's a good question of like sort of a code organization. And over the years, I've seen various approaches to that, including submodules one. And I kind of worked with both, or with that one, or with another approach, which is effectively mono-repo, right?
Yeah, the one repo, yeah.
Repository with like everything in it. At the end of the day, on mobile, let's say you have a web project, right? Like backend servers. Likely your size of your code and size of your teams and everything else is just so humongous, doesn't make sense to do it, and you probably want to split it into multiple repos and have submodules or whatnot. For mobile, at the end of the day, the best practice, at least so far, is actually mono-repo. That works the best.
Exactly. I also encountered this in my previous experience as an Android developer, where I have like a white label app and other submodules and other like more specific apps for it, and we we combined that in one repo, and it was really easy to work on. But I never done it in iOS, and that's why I asked, like, maybe it's really hard to do it with Xcode, you know, these kind of things.
So basically the idea here is this. You want to split, it's a modularization approach. At your size, likely you actually don't need it because it's just 3 people. If you had maybe 10 at least, or like 20, 30, then think about it. But if you do want to modularize, so modularizing is a good idea. You want to have different scopes, different libraries, different targets for, let's say, shared code or something like that, that then can be imported in the main target of your one application or multiple that you have. But splitting the code itself, though, does not make much sense, because as you mentioned, you change something in one of those libraries, and then your one app that you're currently compiling for, you get notification, quote unquote, about it from the compiler, but the other apps you don't, because you need to check out the repo.
Yeah, and you never do it.
Right. So at the end of the day, even large teams, and the previous large team I worked at was Uber, they have a lot of people, maybe like 100 developers, right? And they ended up doing mono-repo. They have articles about it explaining why. And the only sort of the advantage is that everyone has access to the code. And actually, even if you're working on a feature, sometimes you need to change something in platform libraries, you are empowered to do so. You have the code right there, you can change it. The only thing is then you submit your commit, your pull request, and then appropriate people who are responsible for that chunk of code, for that platform stuff, will be gatekeepers to give you approval for your pull request.
Yeah.
So you get that. The one disadvantage, though, and that's only applicable for size of Uber or similar, all of your code in one repo means your compile time is just, it's insane. It's minutes, tens of minutes sometimes.
I can imagine, but is it like something doable then? You actually saw it, so I guess
it is, and I think at the end of the day, I still believe the compile time, even though it's a disadvantage, it's worth it, because then you have access to everything and you're empowered to.
I also think about that.
I
also think like because you can just maybe you introduce a bug in other apps by pushing something into a submodule that is used only in the app you are working. So I think it's good, but like how to do it, like there are articles. I never found it easy.
The easiest way, I mean, again, what you really want, as far as I understand, is modularization. So the easiest way to start, I've just done it for my small app a few weeks ago, CocoaPods. You can just have a mix of CocoaPods and Xcode project settings. You just create new Xcode project targets for like your libraries. So probably, I guess, a library per your submodule or something in your case. and then you create in CocoaPod's pod file respective declaration for that target. Yeah, and that's it. And then you depend on it in your main target or targets of your apps. So it's a bit finicky because it's sort of a mix of pod file declaration that generates some Xcode project stuff, and then your Xcode project settings on top of it. So it's a bit clunky, but at least you don't have to figure out too much and do too much work to make it happen. You could always go towards a heavy-duty tool for that, such as Buck. It's a Facebook tool for building projects. That's for large teams. But that will work, though. That will work like a clockwork.
But you mean, so like the general idea is having those submodules that are reused across the different apps as pods?
Effectively, yes.
All right. Okay.
I don't know how technically it's categorized in CocoaPods. Are they like internal pods, external pods, or something like that? But at least that's what I did in my project, right? Everything's in one repo. Everything's in one folder, roughly speaking, of my app. But then I have multiple targets. And those targets for like persistence framework, for networking framework, they are just a Swift framework target, I believe. And a bunch of files are in that target. And my app target depends on it. So I do like import persistence framework or import networking framework.
Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you.
I have a doubt. Dennis was asking about like 4 different apps using the same code base. Was that your question, Dennis?
Using some pieces, some common pieces.
Oh, using the same code base for like 2 or 3, 4 different apps. Means only some pieces, right? Okay.
Yeah, like some feature, like some common features.
Okay.
Right, makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's the best case. Use those codes as a framework within the same.
Joshua, you had a question before recording about Mvvm. So let's go for that, and then Ramar, if you have any questions, let's have you next.
Okay.
Yeah. So my question was how in Mvvm. So I've seen in Mvvm sometimes the detail view we don't need. It should be like a simple view, and the master view is like a table view. We can create it as a Mvvm. For example, a product list view for say an Amazon app. So it has a list view first. When people click on it, they can see the detail view.
Mm-hmm.
So how will you do the Mvvm for the master view, and how you will go from the master to the detail view, and also in the detail view, will you do it Mvvm or just keep it a simple MVC?
Got it. So, okay, Mvvm, model view model, right? That design pattern, it's a design pattern for the view at the end of the day. It's just to decouple a little bit of logic or data out of your view layer.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're talking about, there are multiple ways to go about it, but let's say you have a typical MVC master detail setup, right? Mm-hmm. Apple's iPad master detail setup kind of application.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you have? And let's say, as you said, Amazon example, you have your domain model is products, and you have a list of products. That's the master screen or master view, and then the detail is to displaying that product that was selected in more detail, right? So in this case, how you would transition from typical MVC to Mvvm in that case, you start with the list, and everything you display in the list, the products there, right? You have respective view models for them. and they wrap around your model object. So if your model object is a collection of product types, then you'll have product view model, for example. And so product view model sort of list item, because or some other name like that. So you want to specify that this view model is only for the list. It's not going to be used in the detail, because the detail needs different kind of data from product, more likely. But cells in the list, they only need a little bit, like title, summary, or whatever, preview, and a thumbnail image. But the product detail needs the whole carousel of images, and maybe the whole description of the product, and price, and whatever else. So then, yes, in your list, you'll have your products, how do I call them? Product list item view models. And then in your detail screen, you'll have product detail view model, or something like that. They will likely wrap around the same product model though, right? Because that, again, likely will be your one source of data with like all the stuff in it. But again, you don't need all the stuff in cells, and you don't need all the stuff in product detail screen. And what you pass around upon selection when you initialize your new master detail screen, you pass around the product model, right? And then you generate instantiate new view model for that detail screen around it. That's basically how you go about it.
Okay, got it.
So I guess the main point, you won't share the view model between them, because the view model is more specific to concrete view.
Yes, got it. Yeah, that was one of my other questions. Can we share, or is it better to keep it separate?
You can, right? So like technically.
Also, when you make view models, do you make it as a struct or class?
Depends, but likely struct. View models are actually a pretty interesting topic. I have something I want to write about it, like a big article. There is so much confusion about view models in iOS community, because everyone has their own approach and flavor of view models, coming from different backgrounds of different languages and stuff like that.
If you have a function to fetch the products, right? Fetch products. Will you call it from the view model?
So, okay, yeah, this is where I'm getting.
Or from the view controller? You
could either. And so there is a school of thought where view model is just a dumbass piece of data that just it's effectively a configuration object. It doesn't do anything, doesn't have any logic, nothing.
I've seen both. People doing both. So.
But there is another school of thought where view model is actually kind of smart, and it does data fetching, it does other stuff, and it then syncs data through some binding. But there are also like dials degrees of that, right? Does it do networking or not? Or it just does reactive updating? Maybe it does both. So this is what I want to kind of summarize at some point, maybe like do a video or an article. I actually, at some point, put together a list of all of those approaches, from the simplest to the most complex. And the simplest would be the data transfer object, where it's just simple data primitives for effectively configuration object, and the most complex, where your view model has a lot of business logic and does, well, again, networking and other things, and it's very smart, and view asks it to do things, which kind of, then it becomes a presenter type of thing.
Yeah.
But there's a lot there. I don't know, we maybe can get back to it.
So which is the design pattern you use now in Wayfair?
Wayfair, they have one of those variations. I'm still learning, it's my 4th week, but from the documentation I read that they have on the topic, they have view models as data transfer objects effectively.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about the Uber? What you worked in Uber?
Over there, they did not declare a concrete way, like this is how we're doing it. So it was up to each team, and I saw some teams do data transfer objects, and I saw other teams do more of a data binding and formatting.
Yeah.
But they never put logic in it, because at Uber it's a rib architecture, so all the business logic would be in interactor.
Yeah. What did you do? What did you worked on? You worked on which design pattern in Uber?
Rib architecture. It's a unified grand architecture for the whole company.
Okay. What is called?
Ribs, Uber Ribs.
Uber.
Router interactor builder.
Is it open source or something?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's actually fantastic. It's the best architecture I've ever seen for mobile. I highly recommend checking it out.
Okay, Uber Rips. And I have one more question.
Hold on to it. Let's go to Ramar.
Yeah, so my question was just kind of just like, what is unit testing? When should you like implement it? Whatnot.
Gotcha. So unit testing is a technique, maybe that's how it's categorized, a technique of development. You can either do it sort of before you write production code, that's called TDD, or after you write production code. But at the end of the day, it's your other code that tests your code, right? Your production code, effectively validating its correctness. And that's pretty much what it is. It's typically each platform, and well, in our case, iOS, Xcode, they have support for unit testing. In our case, it's XC test. That's the main framework implementation for unit testing. There are other options like, what was it? Nimble, quick and nimble, something else for like more of a BDD style behavior driven or whatever it's called testing. But TDD is, one second, I need to turn off my notifications. XC test is a typical X unit style of testing. That's how it's called. It's an approach to testing. What you usually do conceptually, you have a system under test, so-called. So let's say you wrote a controller or a service object that does networking or something like that, right? Or even your view model that maybe has some logic. So, and this is the class, the type, the object that you're testing. So then that becomes your system under test, right? You would usually create a new class for your tests that has a bunch of methods and those methods prefixed with the word test. Then the system can pick them up and execute them. So in each one of those methods, you would create your system under test. In this case, maybe a view model, right? And then execute some code on it using its public API. Let's say that view model had a function called fetch products for our Amazon example, right? And you want to validate that fetching of the products actually happens, and that function returns the result with, let's say you've passed it a param of some kind, like fetch products, I don't know, chairs, right? That was your param, and you want to validate that it returns 5 chairs with specific names. Then that's what you do. You initialize your view model, you call that method, and then you assert, you store its result of that call in some property, and then you assert on that result, right? And XC test will give you a bunch of little functions to help you with assertion. Yep, and that's the idea. It's I would say it's an intermediate kind of thing. So as a beginner, if you're a beginner, it's difficult to start with unit testing and test-driven development specifically, because you need to think a little bit ahead, if that makes sense. But when you your skills improve, when you grasp your coding better, then it's easier.
Okay.
And we have someone else too. Sorry, did that answer, or do you have any follow-ups?
Yeah, that answered my question. I just like wanted to know like a general gist of it.
I would say this, sort of, in addition to it, it's as a professional developer down the road, like sort of after beyond intermediate, that's a must know. That's a must do, must know. Quality of your code. You'll have to test your code. Maybe not TDD, but ideally I would say TDD. But you cannot just rely on writing your code and then maybe running it manually once or twice. It works, but as the amount of code you write grows and other people on your team write, no one person can actually double check again and again as the code changes if the rest still works. That's where tests come in handy.
Okay.
All right, so we got Louise joining. Do you have any questions? Let us know. Maybe not. Questions go in 1, 2, 3. All right, let's go back to Joshua. I believe he had something, if he's still here too.
No.
Probably not. Oh no, he's back. Dennis, did you have anything?
Yeah, actually, I had something, but it went out of my mind right now.
Here's my question. Sorry,
Okay.
I'm making a tease. That's why I have to. So here's my question. So have you worked with API? You might have. Everyone will work with API keys. So
API keys.
how you save API keys in your project? How do you do that?
You mean for like a third-party API you use?
Or any API key. If suppose it should be a secret, right? Like you don't want to expose it in your Xcode project. How you deal with that?
Yeah.
Right.
Like
keychain. That's one way to go. It's the most secure thing on the platform available to us.
Other than the keychain, do you have any other way you have tried?
I mean, you typically ship it with your code, right? But you don't store secret keys in your repo. So they need to come from some config file from outside, more secure. But basically at the final, ideally in your continuous integration pipeline, at the final step before you submit to Apple, when your CI compiles the whole thing for the like prod release, it should go fetch somewhere else from a secure place your config file that will contain your secret key, and then put it inside of your, that final build. And then that gets compiled and shipped to Apple, and it's up to them to make it, safe.
Yeah, should be in the server.
There's something called CocoaPod keys. Have you seen that? Have you?
What keys?
CocoaPod keys.
Mm-mm. Yeah. There are a lot of libraries out there that kind of help with that.
CocoaPod keys is particularly for this one. So for saving an API key. So when it's like that, we provide the API key when we install the CocoaPod in the terminal. It asks you for the API key and you enter it there. So it should be stored inside the binary file, inside the terminal. So it won't be there in your project.
Right, exactly. So you do that manually by hand in terminal, but when ideally that's your CI pipeline does it automatically.
If I give you that Xcode project, so when you install the CocoaPod in your laptop, you need that key.
Exactly. Yeah, it won't work. Yeah.
It will work. That's one way I've done. I want to know if there is some other ways.
I mean, mostly it's that sort of the approach. You just automate it as much as you can. But in general, that's what you do. And it's annoying. Usually, that's why I like working with big teams now. Usually there are people who take care of that.
Yeah.
I don't have to think about it. I remember back in the day when I was either solo or like on a team of 2 or 3 people, we had to take care of all of that ourselves. We had to write fast lane scripts and stuff like that. Ugh, so annoying.
So, have you worked on different like QA app, dev release, like not QA and production, and so how you for different apps, how you deal with that usually?
Oh, you mean like environment setup?
Yeah, if
Well,
you have different environments.
yeah, usually it's different targets, and
You do it with the targets.
yeah, and then they have respective configuration files.
Mm-hmm.
Then they point to, let's say, staging server instead of production server.
Okay.
Again, you can do it manually. You can, like, if you're like team of one, right? You're probably easier for you just to comment out some code, like the base URL from one to another, right? And just compile. It's faster. But when you grow, eventually you need to have some automation around it. So yeah, don't feel bad if you like comment code out and comment code in if you're small, but then get rid of it later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, from my side. Any other? Let me think of some.
Oh, cool, guys. I mean, if you don't have any other questions, it's actually been, what, 40 minutes? Pretty good.
So, have you written any books so far?
Oh yeah, I have one. The iOS interview guide. Will help you pass iOS interviews if you're, job hunting.
That's cool. Anything coming up new?
There is something. Yes, there's something I'm working on. Working on a screencast about Uber Ribs architecture. Actually,
Okay.
I want to show something next week. Fingers crossed if I finish it.
That would be nice.
Do you ever do any tutorials, like YouTube tutorials?
No, this is my sort of start of that or something like that. I don't have time, unfortunately. I have maybe 1 or 2 videos on YouTube that like do some tutorial-y stuff, but they're like super short and niche. I want to do more. Unfortunately, no time. Hopefully, at least it's not as time consuming for me. Like I spend an hour right now. At least help you guys out. So, hopefully we'll do more of that at least.
Okay.
But yeah, we have a podcast though, me and my co-host. So we share some stuff there. If you guys want to check it out, it's insideiosdev.com.
I think I've heard it. I think.
Yeah, my co-host Andrew, he works at Reddit, so he's doing a lot of that, architecting and all of that too.
Are you guys doing it through Skype or something?
Well, now we'll have to. So we actually use Zoom for our last. On Sunday we recorded a couple of episodes. We'll see how it goes. It's fine, but we used to do it in person, so it was way easier. I'll figure it out. All right, guys. Thanks, everyone. I'll at least stop recording if you want to say something, personal.
Hey, Alex.
Yeah.
I have just a question, a small one. Are you available or on any Slack community workspace where you exchange ideas on Swift or iOS?
You mean me, myself?
Yeah. Like if you have been on some.
Not really. Sort of same thing. No time. I usually like use my podcast and Twitter, I guess, as 2 places where like dump some thoughts. But no.
All right.
Yeah, I used to. Wait, what did I used to do? There was the Big Nerd Ranch forum, I believe.
Yeah.
So it used to be there a long time ago, though. I think it's still around. And I used to be in another forum. I remember, Thoughtbot. I don't know if you know about those guys. They're a Rails shop, but they used to do some iOS development. Actually, maybe they're still doing some iOS development too. So yeah, I was there. But I used to be a lot in Rails community, actually. They're an interesting inspiration for knowledge sharing, at least. I highly recommend if you want to like learn something else, Ruby and Rails.
Where exactly?
It's Ruby on Rails. The
Oh.
Thoughtbot forum, I don't remember. I think it's called Upcase right now these days. All right, cool. I'll stop this, and we'll see if I can do more of this. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.